the BC coast in the 1930s and 1940s. Before the airport was built in 1952 and provided regular plane service, and our road ferry connection with the Sechelt Peninsula was completed in 1954, Powell River was completely dependent on boats of many kinds. They were our lifelines. There were 3 steamship lines that were extremely important to the people of Powell River and the whole BC coast. Those lines were the Canadian Pacific steamships, the Canadian National steamships, and the Union steamships, and they provided daily service. The Canadian Pacific ship, the Princess Mary, ran an overnight trip to Vancouver 3 times a week. Our family would take a taxi to the company wharf to board the ship at 11:30 at night, hours past my brother Doug's and my bedtime. There was no waiting room on the wharf, and when we were traveling at Christmas time, we just about froze, especially Mum and me wearing skirts. Once we were aboard, it was good to warm up in our small, cozy stateroom. As the ship sounded its whistle and left the wharf, we saw our town ablaze with lights. As the mill generated an excess of power and encouraged residents to leave their porch lights on at night, the town site became known as the White City. It was a cheerful sight for ships sailing by at night. Elsewhere, during the Depression, people turned off every light possible. We took turns peering out the porthole until we melted into the darkness. Then we slept well in comfortable bunks. On the 3 days the Mary ran overnight trips to Vancouver, she also scheduled daytime sailings to Vancouver Island. The boat docked at various places during the trip: Blubber Bay, Denman and Hornby Islands, Union Bay, and Comox. Several times we traveled to the island on the Mary for summer holidays. When he was in high school, Doug learned that the Mary had steerage quarters at a great price, 75 cents for a bunk in the hold. But with the clanking metal noises of stowing cargo and throbbing engines, he didn't get much sleep. The Canadian national ship, the Prince Rupert, served small communities and logging, mining, and fishing camps on the northern coast. Then on Saturdays around 10:30 a.m., it arrived at our company wharf. As we left Powell River, Doug and I kept our eyes glued to the coast to see who would first spot the white surge towers above the Stillwater Dam. The 20-story tower rose through the sounding forest in stark contrast to the green trees, a very conspicuous landmark. Although most of the Prince Rupert's passengers were working-class people during those cash-strapped times, the ship was well known for its very elegant dining room. Mum had saved up for a special family treat, and we were going to dine there in style. Just before supper, a steward walked around the ship sounding his gong and announcing, "First call for dinner, first call for dinner." And later he announced the last call for dinner. We made our way down the wide stairway with its shiny wooden banisters into the dining room. The head steward unhooked the red velvet rope across the bottom step and welcomed us in. Wow, it looked pretty posh, with white linen tablecloths and lots of shiny silver and glassware. A waiter put silver bowls of water in front of us. Doug and I looked at each other wondering what on earth they were. So Mum told us about finger bowls. The third line of ships, the Union steamships, were nicknamed the Up Coast Streetcar Line because of the many stops they made. Doug and I loved the trip on the Union when they pulled into all the little settlements and work camps. From the rails, we watched the handling of cargo. One year, I had my camera with me to photograph these interesting activities. But aboard, I saw signs proclaiming it was illegal to take photographs from ships during wartime. Deckhands threw ropes to men waiting on floats or wharfs to tie up the boat. We watched as crew members secured heavy loads like cars and machinery in metal or rope slings, then hoisted them with the ship's booms over the deck, down through the hatch into the hold. The ships also had side doors through which most of the other goods were loaded, everything needed by isolated stores and inhabitants, plus bundles of newspapers and bags of mail. The Union was always willing to make unscheduled stops at floats that flagged them down with some prearranged signal. The trip from Vancouver to Powell River could take up to 12 hours, depending on the number of stops and time spent handling cargo. Estimated time of arrival had real meaning for those waiting the Union steamship. The Union offered excursion deals all along the coast. Those were popular with Depression-era people craving a getaway at a price they could afford. Same-day return tickets between Vancouver and Powell River cost only $2. Many people, like my grandma, wanted the good deal, but she wanted to stay in Powell River longer than a day. So, on arrival, they could waive the return portion of their tickets, and many travelers were eager to buy one for $1. Views of our coast changed after the report of a Japanese submarine shelling the west coast of Vancouver Island in 1942. British Columbia blacked out. The town site was no longer the White City, and the Stillwater Tower was camouflaged. Powell River in the 1930s and 1940s was filled with marine sounds and sights, some now just a memory. There were different whistle blasts from the variety of passenger ships and from cargo ships transporting our paper worldwide. On foggy days, the deep, two-note moans of foghorns sent shivers up your spine. Tugboats towed log booms, Davis rafts piled high with logs, scows full of bright yellow sulfur, and barges of hog fuel. There was constant activity on our waterfront. It felt alive and was very interesting.